Hello, this is Uri L'Tzedek's Talking Torah and Tzedek. I'm Judry Subar. I'm here with Rabbi Yair Silverman, a Rav in the community of Zichron Yaakov in Israel. Rabbi Yair, hi, how you doing?
Thanks, Jed. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And one of the great aspects of technology is that we can be sitting across the globe and feel that closeness and that relationship. And it's very, very special. So
Indeed. Yeah, great to have you here. You and your wife, Ilana, run an organization in Zichron called Moed. What's that all about?
Well, you know, I'm originally Canadian from Montreal. And when we arrived in Israel, the thought of working in anything related to kind of Jewish professional life seemed like a ridiculous plan. Literally bringing coal to Newcastle, bringing rabbis to Israel seemed like was not what the Jewish field needed back in 2006. But very quickly it became apparent that for Israel to be a Jewish state, we needed to find a way that Judaism could relate to most Jews. And most Jews aren't going to be, traditional Jews necessarily in the narrow definition of the word, but are going to connect to Judaism on their own terms, in their own space. And so much in Israel of religion is controlled by I know this is going to be on the web, so I want to stay positive, but by a organized rabbinic establishment that's just painfully failing the needs of, I'd say, upwards of 80% of the population. So we came together with a group of families here in Zichron, both people who define themselves as religious and those who define themselves as secular, and said, let's see how Judaism can impact and inform our lives. And the two main components that we've been utilizing have been both study, because study is something that builds bridges, and social action, a sense of social responsibility that's so critical for the purpose of perfecting and making the world that God creates, the world that's described in Genesis, is a world in which the world isn't perfect, in which there are terrible plagues, and there's loneliness, and there's disappointment, and there's frustration. And the traditional Jewish perspective is that we have the capacity to be agents of good, agents of change within this not yet perfect world. In fact, to perfect that world. And that's not something that religion should be left out of, but religion should be a key component of that.
So you've talked about working on your own and with others as an agent of change. You've talked about the different religious streams that are represented in Israel. Do you view yourself and organizationally, your organization, as primarily being a change agent for the Jewish people, or is it broader than that?
Well, that's a great question. In Israel, while there is a large segment of the population is Jewish, there are also critical members of Israeli society that aren't Jewish. And part of creating a society that can affect that change is not to say, you're in, you're out, but rather to say, we're all in, everybody's in, and we're all trying to figure it out together. And I think that's part of the process that has, I think, began really, way back at Mount Sinai in the Jewish tradition, but really with the return of Jews to the land of Israel, we're part of this amazing experiment to see how we can create a society that models and lives the values that we've been speaking about for 2,000 years. And some days it's going really amazing, and some days it's really challenging, but it's exciting to see the experiments unfold in front of us.
What are some of the social action projects that Moed's involved with?
So we have four core social action projects. One is our long-standing one already in its 12th year, is called Project Chesed v'Tzedek in Hebrew, or Chesed and Tzedek Project, which we take young students, both boys and girls, both religious and secular, and bring them together for a year-long fellowship. And during that fellowship, they're exposed to really a full spectrum of the social challenges that the state of Israel faces. Starting off very simply, relatively simply, all the children, regardless, and in the Carmel region, there's a great, in Zichron in particular, tremendous socioeconomic diversity. You have people who have had, successful exits, and people who literally are bus drivers and maintenance workers for the local municipality, and our kids are all in the same school together in a way that almost in America, certainly in the Jewish community, you almost never see, but even in the broader American society, things are much more fractured in many ways. And bringing together those children in and of itself to study and to learn about what are the challenges. The first challenge, because they are children, is we bring them to a Beit Yiladim. A Beit Yiladim is an amazing organization. We work closely with Neve Michael and Pardes Chana, where children, for whatever reasons, generally speaking, cases of significant illness or abuse, the state has decided that the family is no longer able to care for these children. So they are brought sometimes in the middle of the night to an institution which has foster parents who live on campus. And they're there until their birth families are able to take them back. We come in with a group of kids and say, just play with the kids. Don't ask why you're here. Don't ask where your mom is. Don't ask where your dad is. And play, because kids can play in the most natural way. And it might not be social justice in the first moment, but it's about reaching outside of your bubble to experience the other. After that, we move on to the next stage of dealing with children who are suffering from illness. And we work with medical clowns who come in and train our fellows. How do you walk into a hospital and how do you see the healthy part in each child? And in our area, in the Carmel region, the local hospitals, 50% of the kids speak only Arabic, because in all the towns around Zichron, they only start studying Hebrew, even though it's the state of Israel, in 7th grade. So any child who's getting education, they start Arabic right away from birth, English in 2nd grade, Hebrew in 7th grade. So when you walk into the children's ward at a local hospital, half the kids don't necessarily even speak the same language of Hebrew or English that our kids are able to communicate in. But how do you find nonverbal ways to communicate the caring and love and see the image of God in each person, each child? After that, we deal with disability. If you've ever, and Judry, I know you've had the opportunity to come to Zichron. It's a lovely town, but it's built with old cobblestones. So as romantic and beautiful as it is, it's very un-wheelchair accessible. We take our kids on a local, we borrow wheelchairs, take them around, so which places were inaccessible, how did that make you feel? And then we find each year at least 1 or 2 places where the city invested and make that particular street corner now have a dip. And after that, we go off to Aline, which I believe you also have done some work with, and do a festival with kids there who are not ill, but disabled, and see the abilities that exist. After that, we deal with the issue of poverty. Israel, as in many countries, has great socioeconomic diversity. The reality is that 1/3 of Israeli children live under the poverty line. That means that a family of 5 has 23 shekel, about $6 for their $7 for their main meal of the day. We send the kids to the supermarket to go try and buy a meal for a family of 5 with $6.50, and they come back blown away, many of these children. After that, we volunteer with food rescue, and then we go on to deal with environmental issues, particularly in the Zichron area. There's a very strong awareness of the natural gas development, and how do we find a way to both develop productive alternative sources of energy. And then we deal with animals, seeing eye dogs, horse therapy, and ultimately each one of these children takes on a personal project, and that's my greatest source of pride. We have over 300 alumni. Some of these children are now not only children, they're in their 20s, have been doing their own personal project for 8, 9, 10 years, whether it's pairing themselves up with a child in need or a particular cause, and it's amazing. That's the first project, the Chesed and Tzedek Fellowship, in the sense of training future leaders to have that. Project we began just this year called Tavlin Sodi. If you've been to Zichron, it has a strong foodie element to it, of people investing in food and being interested in food. So we created a project called The Secret Spice, or in Hebrew, the Tavlina Sodi, where we have a cohort of both children with again, though I am a native English speaker, when I discuss my projects, the language I most often do it in is in Hebrew, hitpatchut tkina, normative development, and those with special development integrated together, meeting top chefs in cooking workshops. And we see someone who's, we just recently did one, the last one before Corona was a sushi workshop with a top amazing sushi, I can't speak English, sushi chef. That's not easy. In town, and you see a child in a wheelchair rolling sushi, and the smile and the joy, and it's unclear who has the normative development and who doesn't within the group, and very intentionally, it's not so much mainstreaming, it's non-streaming. It's seeing the change and saying we can take pride in what we do in creative ways. In addition, from the very beginning, we have an adult program of regular volunteering, whether it's something similar to Habitat for Humanity, working on people's homes who are not able to maintain their homes, and finding particular projects that we do. We try to do one at least once each quarter, whether it's a home renovation or whether it's a beach cleanup in a productive way. And ultimately, the fourth project that's in kind of the narrow tikkun olam aspect, or social justice, is working very closely with the local municipalities to develop an awareness of how the welfare department is able to not just be one of the great challenges in many departments is the bureaucracy, and helping people navigate through that bureaucracy. It's kind of more of an advocacy aspect of our program.
It sounds like a great set of projects and initiatives. You spoke about this a little bit, but I was just wondering if you could expand just a tiny bit more on the question of whether the work that your organization does and that the people involved with it do has a greater impact on the people in need who are getting help from the organization, or on the people who the kids, for example, who are involved in social action work, or maybe it's synergistic, maybe it's kind of all of the above.
Well, one of the great questions is who's helping whom, right? And obviously, ultimately, our goal is not to have a hierarchical, I'm here to help you, but rather for people to meet. And I think it's very true, and I think we've seen it primarily, almost overwhelmingly. I kind of feel, I don't know how things are in the States, but here in Israel, people are both overwhelmed by Corona and kind of had enough talking about it. You're living through it. You don't need to discuss it in addition to experiencing it firsthand. But certainly during these last 3 months, with so many people dealing with isolation, anytime you have two people meet each other, whether it's the person who's, as it were, initiating the contact, or whether it's the person who's receiving the contact, well, who's helping whom, right? We have a network, even without Corona, we have a network of Holocaust survivors in the region who we have ongoing relationships with. During Corona, we've ramped up those activities. It's together with the local municipality, but we've paired up that many people get 2 or 3 visitors a week to their home. And most of the people who go to visit, as it were, are coming to help someone who's homebound, who's afraid to go out, who's wary. Generally speaking, or hopefully speaking, they walk away saying, wow, I got a window into this amazing human being, and I feel so much better about myself and about the world that we're creating, because we're in fact creating it together. It's not so much one person helping the other, but it's together, each one of us is filling in a need and a want of the other. One of the classic discussions in the Bible, in chapter 15 of Deuteronomy, there are 2 visions of a prophetic, perfected world, right? One vision is Efes kiloye bechavyon. There'll never be ultimately, when the laws of the Torah are fulfilled, there'll be no one in need. There'll be no one who is, the Hebrew word is evyon, who's destitute among you. And the next verse, 11, not the next verse, 6 verses later, the Torah describes Ki lo yechdal evyon mikerev haaretz. The person in need will never leave the land; they'll always be there. And many of the classic commentators say, "What's going on? Is it there'll be no one in need? Lo yebecha evyon. There'll be no one who's in evyon. Or ki lo yechdal evyon. Those in need will never dissipate from the land." And one explanation that at least speaks to me is we hope to create a world in which people's physical and material needs are all met. And I know this is a touchy subject in the world of Tikkun Olam, but I'm a big advocate that the world is in fact, with technology, getting progressively better, and we're able to achieve wonderful things in the world of medicine, in the world of agriculture, things that would seem almost fantastic, almost science fiction-like, which frightens other people, and we understand that and respect that, but I believe we're here to perfect that world. But we'll always be in need. We'll always need the smile, the care, the warmth, the interaction with the other person, even when all our seemingly material or real needs are met. The emotional needs are always there, and we seek to create a world that is not disconnected, but is more and more interconnected, and more supportive of one another. It'd be God's will.
Yeah, that sounds like a great enterprise, great undertaking. I'm wondering if
it's a lifelong journey, and I think it goes beyond any of our lifetimes.
Well, yeah, both again for better and for worse, I suppose.
Right. But it's a forever receding horizon, as most horizons should be.
Right. I'm wondering if just to finish up, you could give us your thoughts on the following question. Obviously, you live and work in Israel, and you deal on a daily and deep basis with the challenges, some of the many challenges that Israeli society presents. You mentioned that you grew up in Canada. I know you've lived in the United States. What do you think Israel and North America can learn from each other relative to dealing with some of the sorts of challenges that you've been talking about?
Listen, that's a great question. I'm not sure if you mean kind of from an overall government structure issue or from within the Jewish community. I think the government structure issue I'll leave to the political scientists to debate. I will say this, though not an American by birth, and I feel the deep pain that American society has been going through over these last weeks. And from across the seas, I wish that the greatness, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. That's, from my mind, there's a prophetic vision of a chevra metukenet, of a refined and perfected society. And yes, in Judaism, we have high bars, and I think America also has high bars. And unfortunately, when you set the bar high, you often fail, and failing to reach those bars are very, very difficult. One of the great, religious polemics between Judaism and Christianity, and with great respect for both, is the Christian critique of Judaism is that you have all these 613 commandments, and the Bible itself testifies, "Ein tzaddik ba'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yechta." There's no righteous person who can get it all right and not sometimes fall short. The law is unredeemable. We need to find redemption in a different way. And the Jewish tradition says, no, the law envisions a redeemed society, knowing full well that none of us will ever live up to those ideals, but we reaffirm the greatness of those ideals daily, even while falling short. I know the parent I want to be, the spouse I want to be. I hope that the person I want to be will always be beyond the person that I am. For once I believe I've made it, I'm great, then I think we're all in deep spiritual and emotional and psychological difficulties. So I think that both there are many wonderful things in American society, and there are many things that America can learn from the world around. And likewise, there are many wonderful things in Israeli society, and there are things that Israel can desperately learn. I think some of the aspects that I think Israel can share with the world in a productive way is really living the narrative. I think that the story of the Jewish people returning to its land, whether one is religious or secular, and taking that story and bringing it to life, not in a way that I'm kind of making it into a caricature, but I'm living my history and I'm at one with it. And I know I'm not perfect, but I know I'm willing to keep at it is something that's great. And at the same time, America's, from my perspective, one of America's great contributions to human society, and I think we will forever be indebted for it, is not so much the history, but the future vision, the vision of creating a society from nothing that can create a sense of equality, a sense we hold these truths to be self-evident, and knowing that the process of getting there is difficult and it's an iterative process, and hopefully each generation does its own little bit to nudge us forward in that regard. That's overall general society. I think from the Jewish society, I would just focus in on the concept that family doesn't mean that you agree with your brother, with your sister, with your cousin, with your aunt, with your uncle, but it means you care deeply about them. And I think all too often we look for models of what it means to have Jewish peoplehood. And for me, the most basic model is a family. That doesn't mean there aren't people that marry. It doesn't mean that people don't join and become part of that family. But once you're in no matter what. And you're in no matter what because we care deeply about one another, even while, or in particular while, we oftentimes disagree with one another. And I don't think we need to be afraid of dissent and disagreement. I think we need to welcome that to a broad tent, to a big tent, to one in which we find each other more caring and more loving and more supporting. So that's my blessing to us all. May it be so, and may we each have the courage to do our small part in this great drama that we're blessed to live during these exciting times.
Sounds like a great vision. Thank you so much for your thoughts.